What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to Bad Takes in Football. This is your host, Bad Takes. Really excited to hop into today's video, but before I do that, this is a new channel, which means you are new. Please subscribe, like, comment, tell me more about what you're looking for. Really excited to engage with you. I really hope you enjoy today's video. Again, Garrett Wilson just signed an extension with the Jets. Now, he is a pretty young wide receiver. This is actually he's gone through 3 years with the Jets. A little uncommon to actually get a contract this early on. And so that's why I really want to talk about this, because you have a lot of wide receivers out there, young as well as old, that are looking to get paid. Specifically, Terry McLaurin will dive into that. But as you can see here, 4-year, $130 million extension. Now, what this really means is they actually have him tied up for 6 years total. This isn't, 4 years from now. This means he will actually be on the team, I believe, through 2030. Now, this is a big addition for them moving forward, because if you think about this, there's a couple reasons why, I would say this is important. One, they just got out of the Aaron Rodgers saga that they tried out. Didn't necessarily go too well for them and the team. They obviously had Super Bowl aspirations. The pundits were saying the same thing about them, but didn't necessarily work out the way that they were looking for. And so really they're trying to change the team makeup. They have a new head coach. And so with that being said, they brought in a whole new regime. They have Justin Fields as their starting quarterback. Now, a lot of people are wondering, okay, like Justin Fields hasn't really done much in the NFL. Why is that valuable? Well, Justin Fields actually worked with Garrett Wilson when they were on the Ohio State Buckeyes in college, and they had a really good rapport, really good relationship then. And obviously, the Jets are looking to see that same continuity moving forward in with them with the Jets. You've seen these sorts of situations happen with teams like the Cincinnati Bengals, where they matched up Joe Burrow as well as Jamar Chase together, who had experience working together in college as well with LSU. To dive a little bit further into what this actually means for the Jets themselves, really quick, I think it's important to kind of talk about a couple things. One, again, why now? Something that we've seen a lot around the NFL, not just in the wide receiver position, but just overall, is the fact that there's a lot of players that are willing to hold out, and they're trying to get paid as soon as possible. Right off the bat, I can think of names like TJ Watt. I can think of names like Trey Hendrickson. But then also in that wide receiver space, again, it's Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin has voiced frustration as recently as this weekend. He was doing a commercial for an automotive group out of the DMV area, and media happened to be there and started to ask him some questions, and he voiced the fact that he wasn't happy with how the progression of his contract extension has gone. And so with that being said, he's not happy, and he's even said off the record, but while at that same venue, is that he doesn't see how he's going to be able to get on the field. Now, I tell you all of that to go back to Garrett Wilson, because nowadays these players are looking to get paid early and often. Just like a 5-year deal doesn't mean much to an NFL team, it doesn't really mean that much to these players anymore. They understand the fact that if they're not producing and the team wants to move on, once that guaranteed money is gone, they're out the door. And sometimes even with that guaranteed money, these owners are willing to swallow that lump sum and deal the players before that contract is up. And so for Garrett Wilson, one, this gives him ease of mind in the sense that the Jets are valuing him. He understands that he doesn't have to negotiate a contract, as of now for the next, 4 to 5 years. Now, do I see that actually being the case? No, I definitely do not see Garrett Wilson being happy with this contract. He's going to see somewhere around, he's getting paid somewhere around like the top 5, top 8 wide receivers in the NFL. But in a couple years, the amount of money that he's making per year is not going to be enough, right? If, as you can see here, it's a $130 million contract. The average is 32.5 million with this deal. Now that's just the 4 years. He still has the other two from his original deal that they can work with. And that means that it really actually comes down to around $23 million per year. Again, still a lot of money, but in a couple of years, that's going to be small potatoes, right? You look at someone like DK Metcalf, who got even less yardage than Garrett Wilson did last year. He's getting paid in the $30 million range already. There's going to be more players that come after him with contracts, right? That's a huge, I would say, pattern in the NFL is once one person gets paid, the next person gets paid, and they get paid, $100,000 or $1 million more per year, or just total on the contract. That's what they're looking for. They just want to be the highest paid. It doesn't necessarily matter how much more, but that seems to be the case. You've seen this with quarterbacks, right? Some of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL are some of the players that aren't necessarily performing at the highest level, right? Trevor Lawrence got a huge contract. Probably had the worst year of his career last year. But he's still one of the highest paid quarterbacks because his contract was up and the Jaguars were looking to pay him, and the market told them what they were supposed to pay him. Now, again, with Garrett Wilson, why is this a smart move? Again, this gives the Jets time to be able to, one, assess, is he a good fit? And what I would still consider, even though it's a good deal for Garrett Wilson, it's also a good deal for the Jets because, again, they didn't wait for him to have some breakout season this year in order to ask for more. He had a productive season. It was like 1,000-yard season, but it wasn't necessarily, a breakout year. And so they didn't have to pay him the highest paid wide receiver contract. They were able to fit him in a top 10 contract instead. And so that helps out the team a lot. And we'll talk even more about how, they were able to utilize that to their advantage, right? When you look at these teams and what's happening with them, again, I'll go back to the Bengals really quick just because, they're in a lot of trouble from this perspective, and I think it's important to mention this, but the Bengals have two players that are holding out at the same position right now. It's Trey Hendrickson and it's Shamar Stewart. Now, they haven't reported to camp yet, so this might change, but as of now, no one is expecting those two players to be in training camp to start. That's a huge problem for them. No NFL team wants to have their top player not reporting to camp like a Trey Hendrickson, right? He led the leagues in sacks last year. I'm not saying Garrett Wilson was going to hold out. I don't think he was fighting for a new contract or was threatening to hold out for a new contract. But at the same time, he's happy, right? He posted right here on social media how happy he is with this new deal. And he's excited to move forward with the Jets. Now, does any of this have to do with the fact that I don't think he was too happy with what happened with Aaron Rodgers? There might be a little bit of that, but I really do think that the Jets are looking at their young core. And I think, again, I'm talking about the young core as a theme probably for today, and it'll probably be a theme moving forward, especially in the NFL. It's a young man's game nowadays. But, they locked up Garrett Wilson in order to be able to have a marquee number one receiver for the next 5 to 6 years if they want, right? Again, this probably will change. I'm not expecting this contract to live out in its entirety, but it's a good start for them. Going into this a little bit more when it comes to Terry McLaurin, right? I think that's important to kind of discuss this a little bit. Terry McLaurin, has been a part of the Commanders throughout all of their major transitions. He was a part of the team when they were the Redskins. He had to deal with the terrible ownership and the transition of the ownership. And when they became the Washington football team and then transitioned to the Commanders, he was a part of all of that. And he stood strong the entire time. There wasn't any part of Terry McLaurin that was looking to get out of Washington, even though there's a really good chance that most top tier wide receivers would not be happy in that situation, right? It seems to be a toxic organization. Again, I'm saying this was in the past, right? This isn't what I'm saying the Commanders are now, but you're talking about one of your leaders and a marquee receiver that had more yards and had more touchdowns than Garrett Wilson, but at the same time, he's still fighting for a contract. And I talked a little bit about the theme of young players, young stars getting paid. Terry McLaurin is older, right? He's in his 30s, and so with the number 3 starting your age comes a lot of doubt and a lot of, I would say, concern when it comes to providing long-term contracts for high dollar amounts, and and also on top of that, a lot of guaranteed money, right? So think about this: Trey Hendrickson, T.J. Watt, both already on a second contract. They're both highly touted, decorated, top performers in the AFC and in the NFL total. Like I said, Trey Hendrickson was the top leader in sacks in the NFL. TJ Watt was right behind him. He was right there. And so everyone is thinking to themselves, okay, how are these guys not getting paid? And a lot of times it's just because of their age. They're looking for 4 to 5 years, and they're looking for high guaranteed dollars. They're looking for large contracts. TJ Watt is looking to get paid near that $40 million a year range, as is Trey Hendrickson. But both the Bengals and the Steelers are hesitant to pay that because of their age, right? There's in the end, father time always wins. And these players aren't getting any younger. And so you need to work with what you have as long as you can. But at the same time, you need to understand when it might be time to cut bait and change what that might actually look like. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, tell me your takes. This is Bad Takes from Bad Takes in Football, signing out.